Robert Pickton isn't just Canada's most prolific serial killer, with 49 confirmed victims. He is also the most grotesque by far. This absolute piece of filth subjected his victims and their remains to more horror than anyone we've ever covered on this channel. Have you by any chance had a pulled pork burger around Vancouver in the 90s? Well, the chance that you've eaten a piece of someone hidden in that barbecue sauce is pretty high. If you're interested in the real cases, the subjects that unearths the darkest corners of humanity, the mysteries that others are too afraid to confront, subscribe to Evidence Obscured because you've come to the right place. Here, no case is off limits. Here's the story of the pig farmer killer, the most hideous killer Canada's ever produced. Let's get into it. Okay, I think we need to start at Pickton's early life to really get a grasp of this case. Robert and his brother David were raised just outside Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, on a pig farm. His mother, whom he idolized, worked them half to death on that little slice of hell. They had no time for homework and showed up at school covered in manure and mud more often than not, earning him the nickname Stinky Piggy. Louise Pickton reveled in inflicting emotional torture, especially at her son's expense. She slaughtered Robert's pet calf and made sure he found the carcass hanging from a hook in the barn. Louise was cold, normalized violence, discriminated between her children by openly favoring David, and she created a household defined by neglect and emotional abuse. Robert dropped out of school at 16 to devote his life to the farm where his tyrannical parents reigned over him. By then, the family were known to be incredibly hardworking and were the suppliers of pork to almost every grocery store in the vicinity. The Picktons were respected for their business and the products they delivered, but at the same time, they were known to be visibly unsanitary and rather crude folk that didn't socialize well with others. It's at this point that Robert's life takes a turn for the strange and bizarre. His parents died, leaving the farm to their sons, and suddenly, Robert had no one to lord over him anymore. In 1996, the brothers registered the farm as a non-profit organization named Piggy's Palace Good Time Society. They had no intentions of doing any good, however. In reality, they converted old warehouses where pigs were once butchered en masse to raves and clubs that were so huge that one party attracted 2,000 people alone. This place was crawling with people from all walks of life. The townspeople, drug dealers, sex workers, business owners, Hells Angels bikers, and even a few people involved in politics. The Piggy Palace was just about the strangest, most popular rave in Vancouver, and at the top of it all were a pair of pig farmer brothers, one of whom was about to take his love for butchery and social isolation to a grotesque new level. In 1995, Dorothy Spence and Diane Melnick went missing. Then, in 96, Cara Ellis disappeared, and no one ever noticed. They were all sex workers, had a history with drug use, and even though their families reported them missing, not much was done to investigate women who had a habit of dropping off the map for a few months at a time. But in 97, that was going to change. That year, 6 more women went missing. Mamie Fry, Helen Hallmark, Sherry Irwing, Cynthia Felix, Lisa Yells, and Andrea Borhaven. It was the other sex workers that made the most noise about it. They were convinced that there was a serial killer on the loose, and the families of the women agreed. In March of that year, Pickton picked up a sex worker in Vancouver's downtown. He took Wendy Lynn Eisetter to his farm, handcuffed her, and stabbed her 4 times. Wendy managed to get loose, wrestled the knife off of him, and she even managed to stab him in the stomach before running away. Robert was arrested for attempted murder, but the case fell flat after Wendy was deemed by the court to be an unreliable witness due to her excessive drug use. All of the horror that followed could have been stopped right here had police just taken the case further. Even if Wendy was in no shape to take the stand, they had enough reason to search his property, knowing that someone was targeting sex workers. They had the means, the justification, and every damn reason necessary to stop Pickton from murdering all the women he went on to kill after attacking Wendy. But they did nothing. To them, it seemed like Wendy and the others were just druggies who didn't deserve their time or resources. In 1998, Angela Jardine, Inga Hall, and Sarah DeVries went missing, followed by Georgia Papin, Jacqueline McDonald, Wendy Crawford, and Brenda Wolfe in 1999. Police could no longer ignore that something extremely worrying was going on. Brenda Wolfe's disappearance was especially puzzling. She was never a sex worker, and well, besides knowing a lot of the women, she didn't really fit the description of the other victims. Not that it helped much. Police had nothing. No bodies meant no cause for action. For 3 more years, girls continued to vanish and authorities were floundering like fish out of water. Dolores Jones, Heather Bottomley, Heather Chinook, Patricia Johnson, Serena Abbotsway, Mona Wilson, and Andrea Josbury were all reported missing, and police were no closer to figuring out who'd taken them. At the end of the day, a completely unrelated tip would be what broke the whole disturbing mess wide open. A tip came in that Robert Pickton had illegal firearms on his farm. Thankfully, Pickton, who rarely bathed himself, didn't bother cleaning up after his murders either. His workshops and trailer were infested cesspools of filth and plenty of human DNA. During their search, they found handbags, clothes, jewelry, medication, and IDs, all of them belonging to the missing women. They extended the search to all 17 acres, and to everyone's horror, it became clear that the whole place was a murder factory of sorts. Skulls in freezers, blood-soaked carpets inside his trailer, bone fragments in pig pens, human DNA on cleavers, mallets, and saws. Not only was Robert Pickton the one murdering all these missing women, he was dismembering them using the butchery equipment and feeding their bodies to the pigs. Even if he wasn't adding their remains to the ground pork intentionally, which, let's face it, he probably was, then at the very least, parts of his victims were being processed along with swine carcasses simply because the bits of flesh and bone were getting stuck in the saws. So transfer into sold pork was all but certain. Thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people had consumed at least some human remains over the years because the Pickton farm supplied pork to almost every shop and butchery in the area. If you're keeping count, I've named 24 women so far. That's not even half of who he killed. Those are only the women who could be named because their personal items were found on the farm or because the remains found were in good enough condition to run DNA on. Most of the bone fragments that were found, and there were thousands, were so small and they'd been disintegrated in pig manure for years, making them impossible to identify. When all of the undefined items and pieces of remains were taken into account too, police could isolate 33 separate individuals. There are a dozen more personal items, thousands more bone fragments, and no way to link them to any specific person. What we do know is that while Pickton was in prison, he confessed to an undercover officer that he'd killed 49 women, a number he was deeply regretful of. Oh, don't feel sorry for the man. He had no regrets about killing anyone. He was just frustrated that he couldn't get that count to at least 50. He also told a friend that he'd killed women and fed them to his pigs long before he was discovered. He boasted to this individual that he used the equipment in the warehouse to dismember them to make it easier to feed them to the animals. He never explicitly divulged what he'd done to these women before killing them, but judging by the horrendous items found inside his trailer, he almost certainly subjected them to hours or possibly days of torture. All in all, the examination of the farm required 100 officers, not counting forensic specialists, and it cost the Canadian government $20 million to complete before the whole place was demolished. The trial didn't go as expected. In 2007, after nearly 3 years in court, Pickton was found not guilty of the 6 counts of first-degree murder that he was on trial for. Instead, he was found guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder. Look, it wasn't a perfect guilty verdict, but it was enough to get him the maximum sentence under Canadian law, so he was going to be behind bars for the rest of his life, no matter what the official convictions were. In 2024, Pickton was killed by another prisoner, Martin Cherist, who was going to be released from prison after 2 years, took a broken broom handle and stabbed Pickton in the face. Cherist was sentenced to life in prison, a fate that he was happy to receive. He admitted to the murder, stating that he did it for the victims. Now, I don't condone murder in any case, but I wouldn't be mad if Cherist got a few donations to his commissary budget for his troubles. The man did the world a favor. Not once did Robert Pickton show remorse for what he'd done. If anything, he was only regretful that he hadn't killed more women. Robert Pickton was a swine, pun intended, a filthy beast that cared as little for his own hygiene as he did for other human beings. He reveled in filth, gore, and death. There is absolutely nothing about this animal that is redeemable. There's one last unanswered question in this case, and that surrounds David Pickton, the pig farmer killer's brother. David lived and worked with Robert on the farm. He partied with him. How could he not have known? No physical evidence has ever been found in his trailer or his movements to tie him to any of the women, and he's denied any involvement. He was definitively linked to the biker gang Hell's Angels in connection with weapons and drug trafficking, and in 1992, he was convicted of a sexual assault that resulted in a fine and just 30 days of probation. Let's just hope that police are keeping a close eye on him and the rest of that eclectic bunch that hung around that farm. If Pickton's jailhouse confessions are anything to go by, then he didn't always act alone.
If that happens, 15 other people are going to go down. It's going to go down. Yeah. That's a bit, my friends.
And now, like always, I leave the rest over to you. Do you think Pickton was telling the truth that there were 49 victims? Who were they, and will we ever truly know how many women are scattered over that cursed 17 acres? And most importantly, how much blame lies with Pickton's upbringing? Personally, I think he was already missing some part of his humanity. His mother and his environment just exacerbated what was already inside of him. Let me know in the comments below, and remember to leave a like while you're at it. See you in the next one, people.